The 48 Laws of Power by Robert Greene. In the 17th century, Nicolas Fouquet was serving as the Minister of Finance for the King of France, Louis XIV. Fouquet was extremely good at his job. He was indispensable and the king needed him very much. When the Prime Minister died, Fouquet expected to be his successor, but instead, the king decided to abolish the position. This and other signs led Fouquet to think that he had lost favor with the king, and he decided to curry favor with him by holding the most wonderful party the world had ever seen in his new country house. The party was attended by the brightest nobles and thinkers in Europe. It started with wonderful dinner and food that no one had ever tasted in France, and that was presented to the tunes of fresh music. After the dinner, Fouquet took the guests in a walk in the wonderful gardens of the palace, which were flourishing with fountains, trees, and flowers. And during their tour in these gardens, a stunning fireworks show was launched. The celebrations continued until late at night, and everyone agreed that this party was the most wonderful party at all. Louis XIV was an arrogant, self-assured man who wanted to be the focus of attention at all times. So he couldn't bear anyone getting ahead of him in wastefulness and opulence. Therefore, on the next day, Louis ordered the head of the guards to arrest Fouquet. And after 3 months, he was brought to the court on charges of embezzlement of the state treasury. In fact, most of the embezzlements was for the king and on his behalf. The court ruled that he was guilty and sent him to the most isolated prison in France, where he spent the last 10 years of his life. Bit to remember: never outshine the master. In the middle of the 9th century, a young man named Michael III ascended the throne of the Byzantine Empire. This emperor was surrounded by many conspirators who wanted to kill him and remove him from the authority. Therefore, he needed someone he trusted as a counselor, so he didn't find anyone except Basileus, his best friend. The two had met in the stables of the kingdom, where Basileus had saved Michael from death after a wild horse escaped from these stables. And as a reward for him, he promoted him from a horse tamer to the head of the stables. Then he began to bestow gifts and presents on him until he became a noble man. As the days passed, he became the king's advisor, advising him on all issues of the state. Then he became the commander of the state army, and therefore Basileus' authority and funds increased. One night, Michael woke up from his sleep to find himself surrounded by soldiers, and Basileus standing and watching while the soldiers stabbed Michael to death. After that, Basileus proclaimed himself as the new emperor of the Byzantine Empire. In another story, the Chinese history after the fall of the Han Dynasty in the year 222 was marching in violent and bloody upheavals, as army men conspired to kill any weak emperor and then appoint a powerful general instead of him. And to ensure his remaining in power, this general used to kill all the powerful generals. But after years, new generals emerged who would either assassinate him or his sons. In the year 959, General Song became the Emperor of China, and to break this terrible routine, he invited the army commanders to a feast and persuaded them to retire from their posts in exchange for wealth and living the nobles' lives. So everyone agreed to his suggestion. Therefore, the flock of friendly wolves that could betray him at any moment were transformed into a group of obedient lambs. This enabled the Song dynasty to rule China for more than 3 centuries. Bit to remember: never put too much trust in friends, and learn how to use enemies. When you try to impress people using rhetoric and words, you become ordinary and vulgar the more you say. Therefore, your ability to control things decreases. Also, the more you say, the higher the chance that you would say something illogical and foolish, which in turn will repel people from you. So you have to speak little, open-ended, vague, and as much as needed only. As a result, you will impress and intimidate people, and inevitably appear more profound and stronger than you are. To clarify this meaning, Louis XIV was a man of few words, and the nobles and ministers in his time spent long days and nights in discussing state issues. So they were meeting, arguing, building alliances, and dismantling them. Then they return back again until they are able to reach the best solution. Then they select two of them in order to present the issue on Louis to give his last decision. And every time, Louis looks at them and says, "I will see." Then he orders them to leave, and the nobles and ministers don't hear another word from the king on this issue. But simply, they see the results when a decision is taken by him to act accordingly. This silence was one of the foundations of his authority, until it was said that no one like him knew how to sell his words, smiles, and even his looks. Everything in him was precious, and his majesty expanded from the scarcity of his words. Bit to remember: always say less than necessary. In the year 1502 in Florence, Italy, a block of marble was placed in the construction department of the church of Santa del Fiore. It was supposed to be transformed into a wonderful piece of art to be displayed in the church. But an unskilled sculptor dug a hole in it by mistake, which led to its deformation. The mayor of Florence had thought about trying to save this block, but he gave up because everyone had agreed that the stone had been destroyed. And things remained like this until a group of Florence nobles decided to invite the great artist Michelangelo. Perhaps he could save this block. And after examining it, he concluded that he could turn it into a beautiful statue. Greene argued that this would be a waste of time because no one was able to save it before. But in the end, he agreed to let him work. A few weeks later, Greene entered the construction department where Michelangelo was putting his final touches on the statue. And since he believed himself as a technical expert, he told Michelangelo that the statue is wonderful, but the nose looks too big. Michelangelo realized that Greene was standing under the huge statue and the angle of view was wrong. And without any word or discussion, he asked Greene to follow him up to the scaffold. And when he arrived, Michelangelo began to knock lightly on the nose and spread the marble dust as he pretended to be busy working on the nose, when he actually didn't change anything in it. And after a few minutes, he asked Greene to express his opinion of the statue after the modification. And Greene replied, "I love it. It's better like this. You made it alive." Bit to remember: win through actions and never through argument.
Thanks for watching. Please follow our social media accounts. Don't forget to like this video and subscribe to our YouTube channel. Also, comment below and share your thoughts on our book summary for this week.